Chapter 15. The dressmaker comes early the next afternoon, a long-fingered fairy called Bramblewift. Her feet are turned backward, giving her an odd gait. Her eyes are like those of a goat, brown with a horizontal line of black just at the center. She is wearing an example of her work, a woven dress with embroidered lines of thorns making a striped pattern down the length of it. She has brought with her bolts of fabric, some of it stiff gold, one that changes color like iridescent beetle wings. Beside that, she tells us, is a spider silk so fine that it could have fit through the eye of a needle 3 times over, and yet strong enough to have to be cut with silver scissors magicked to never lose their edge. The purple fabric shot through with gold and silver is so bright that it seems like moonlight itself puddling over the cushions. All the fabrics are dropped onto the couch in Oriana's parlor for us to inspect. Even Vivi is drawn to run her fingers over the cloth, an absent smile on her face. There is nothing like this in the mortal world, and she knows it. Oriana's current mate, a hairy, wizened creature named Toadfloss, brings tea and cakes, meat and jam, all piled on a massive silver tray. I pour myself tea and drink it without cream, hoping it will settle my stomach. The terror of the last few days is at my heels, making me shudder without warning. The memory of the fiery fruit keeps rising unbidden to my tongue, along with the cracked lips of the servants in Balekin's palace and the sound of the leather as it struck Prince Cardan's bare back. And my own name, written over and over and over. I thought I knew how much Cardan hated me, but looking at that paper, I realized I had no idea. And he'd hate me even more still if he knew I had seen him on his knees, beaten by a human servant, a mortal, for an extra bit of humiliation, an extra dose of rage. Good? Oriana says, and I realize that I've been staring off toward the window and the fading light. Yes? I put on a bright, false smile. Tarin and Vivienne begin to laugh. And just who are you thinking about with a dreamy expression like that on your face? Oriana asks, which makes Vivi laugh again. Tarin doesn't, probably because she thinks I am an idiot. I shake my head, hoping I have not gone red-faced. No, it wasn't anything like that. I was just... I don't know. It doesn't matter. What were we talking about? The seamstress wishes to measure you first, Oriana says, since you're the youngest. I look over at Bramblewift, who holds a string between her hands. I hop up onto the box she has set before her, holding out my arms. I am a good daughter today. I am going to get a pretty gown. I will dance at Prince Dane's coronation until my feet bleed. Don't scold, the seamstress says. Before I can stammer apologizes, she continues, voice pitched low. I was told to sew this dress with pockets that can conceal weapons and poisons and other little necessities. We'll make sure that's done while it's still showing you to great advantage. I almost stumble off the box. I am so surprised. That's wonderful, I whisper back, knowing better than to thank her. Fairies don't believe in dismissing gratitude with a few words. They believe in debts and bargains, and the person I am meant to be most indebted to is not here. Prince Dane is the one who expects to be repaid. She smiles, pinching her mouth, and I grin back at her. I will repay him, although it seems I will have much to repay him for. I will make him proud of me. Everyone else I will make very, very sorry. When I look up, Vivi is watching me suspiciously. Tarin is next to be measured. As she gets on the box, I go and drink more tea. Then I eat 3 sugary cakes and a strip of ham. Where did you go the other day? Vivi asked as I gulped down the meat like some kind of raptor bird. I have woken ravenous. I think of how I fled from our conversation on my way to Hollowhole. I can't exactly deny that, not without explaining more about where I was going than my yeast tongue will allow. I shrug, one-shouldered. I made one of the other gentry kids describe what happened to you at that lecture, Vivi says. You could have died. The only reason you're alive is that they didn't want their game to be over. That's the way they are, I remind her. That's the way things are. Do you want the world to be different than it is? Because this is the world we get, Vivi. It's not the only world, she says softly. It's my world, I say, my heart hammering in my chest. I stand before she can tell me otherwise. My hands are shaking, though, and my palms are sweaty when I go to finger the fabrics. Ever since I staggered home through the woods in my underwear, I have been trying to feel nothing about what happened. I am afraid that if I begin to feel, I won't be able to bear it. I am afraid that the emotion will be like a wave sucking me under. It's not the first awful thing I have endured and pushed it into the back of my brain. That's how I've been coping, and if there's another, better way, I do not know it. I focus my attention on the cloth until I can breathe evenly again, until the panic dissipates. There's a velvet blue-green, reminding me of the lake at dusk. I find an amazing fantastical fabric embroidered with moths and butterflies and ferns and flowers. I lift it up, and underneath is a bolt of beautiful fog grey cloth that ripples like smoke. They're so very pretty, the kind of fabrics that princesses in fairy tales wear. Of course, Tarin is right about stories. Bad things happen to those princesses. They are pricked with thorns, poisoned by apples, married to their own fathers. They have their hands cut off and their brothers turned into swans. Their lovers chopped up and planted in basil pots. They vomit up diamonds. When they walk, it feels as though they're walking on knives. They still manage to look nice. I want that one, Tarin says, pointing to the bolt of fabric I'm holding. The one with the embroidery. She's done being measured. Bibi is up there, holding out her arms, watching me in that unnerving way she has, as though she knows my very thoughts. Your sister found it first, Oriana says. Please, Tarin says to me, bending her head and looking up through her eyelashes. She's joking, but she's not. She needs to look nice for this boy who is supposed to declare himself at the coronation. She doesn't understand what use my looking nice would be, me with my grudges and faults. With a half smile, I set down the bolt. Sure, all yours. Tarin kisses me on the cheek. I guess we're back to normal. If only everything in my life were so easily resolved. I choose a different cloth, the dark blue velvet. Vivienne chooses a violet that seems to be a silvery grey when she turns it over her hand. Orena chooses a blush pink for herself and a cricket green for Oak. Bramble Weft starts to sketch. Billowing skirts and cunning little capes, corsets stitched with fanciful creatures. Butterflies alighting along arms and in elaborate headpieces. I am charmed at the alien vision of myself. My corset will have two golden beetles stitched in what looks like a breastplate, with Maddox mooncrest and elaborate swirls of shining thread continuing down my front, and tiny teardrop slips of more gold. It will certainly be clear to what household I belong. We are still making small changes when Oak runs in, being chased by Narbonne. Oak spots me first and scrambles onto my lap, throwing his arms around my neck and giving me a small bite just beneath my shoulder. Ow! I say in surprise, but he just laughs. It makes me laugh too. He's kind of a weird kid, maybe because he's a fairy, or maybe because all kids, human or inhuman, are equally weird. Do you want me to tell you a story about a little boy who beat a stone and lost all his pearly white teeth? I ask him in what I hope is a menacing fashion, sticking my fingers under his armpits to tickle him. Yes, he says immediately between breathless giggles and shrieks. Orena strides over to us, her face full of trouble. That's very kind of you, but we ought to begin dressing for dinner. She pulls him off my lap and into her arms. He begins screaming and kicking his legs. One of the kicks lands against my stomach, hard enough to bruise, but I don't say anything. Story, he shouts. I want the story. Jude is busy right now, she says, carrying his squirming body toward the door, where Narbonne is waiting to take him back to the nursery. Why don't you ever trust me with him? I shout, and Oriana wheels around, shocked that I said a thing we don't say. I am shocked too, but I can't stop. I'm not a monster. I've never done anything to either of you. I want the story, Oak whines, sounding confused. That's enough, Oriana says sternly, as though we've all been arguing. We will speak about this later with your father. With that, she strides from the room. I don't know whose father you're talking about, because he's sure not mine, I call after her. Taryn's eyes go saucer-wide. Vivienne has a small smile on her face. She takes a minute sip of tea, and then she raises the cup in my direction in salute. The seamstress is looking down and away, leaving us to our private family moment. I cannot seem to contort myself back into the shape of a beautiful child. I am coming unraveled. I am coming undone. The next day at school, Taryn walks beside me, swinging her lunch basket. I keep my head high and my jaw set. I have my little knife with me, cold iron, tucked into one of the pockets of my skirt, and more salt than I reasonably need. I even have a new necklace of rowan berries, sewn by Tatterfell and worn because there was no way she could know I didn't need it. I dally in the palace garden to gather a few more things. Are you allowed to pick those? Tarin asks, but I do not answer her. In the afternoon, we attend a lecture in a high tower, where we are taught about bird songs. Every time I feel as though my courage will falter, I let my fingers brush the cool metal of the blade. Locke looks over, and when he catches my eye, he winks. From the other side of the room, Cardan calls at the lecturer, but does not speak. When he moves to take an inkpot from a satchel, I see him wince. I think about how sore his back must be, how it must hurt to move. But if he holds himself a little more stiffly as he sneers, that seems to be the only difference in his manner. He looks well practiced in hiding pain. I think of the note I found, of the press of his nipped pen hard enough to send flecks of ink spattering as he wrote my name, hard enough to dig through the page, maybe to scar the desk beneath. If that's what he did to the paper, I shudder to think what he wants to do to me. After school, I practice with Madoc. He shows me a particularly clever block, and I do it over and over again, better and faster, surprising even him. When I go inside, covered in sweat, I pass Oak, who is running somewhere, dragging my stuffed snake after him on a dirty rope. He's clearly stolen the snake from my room. Oak! I call after him, but he's up the stairs and away. I sluice off in my bath and then, alone in my room, unpack my school bag. Tucked down in the bottom, wrapped in a leftover piece of paper, is a single worm-eaten fiery fruit I picked up on the way home. I set it on a tray and pull on leather gloves. Then I take out my knife and cut it into pieces, tiny slivers of squeezy golden fruit. I have researched fiery poisons in dusty hand-script books in Maddox's library. I read about the blaser mushroom, a pale fungus that blooms with beds of a red liquid that looks uncomfortably like blood. Small doses cause paralysis, while large doses are lethal, even for the folk. Then there is a death sweet, which causes a sleep that lasts 100 years, and raspberry, which makes your blood race until your heart stops, and fiery fruit, of course, which one book called Ever Apple. I take out a flask of pine liquor, nicked from the kitchens, thick and heavy as sap. I drop the fruit into it to keep it fresh. My hands are shaking. The final piece I put on my tongue, the rush of it hits me hard, and I grit my teeth against it. Then, while I am feeling stupid, I take out the other things. A leaf of raspberry from the palace garden, a petal from a flower of deathsweet, the tiniest bed of juice from the blaser mushroom. From each, I cut away a tinier portion and swallow. Mithridatism is called. Isn't that a funny name? The process of eating poison to build up immunity. So long as I don't die from it, I'll be harder to kill. I do not make it downstairs for dinner. I am too busy retching, too busy shivering and sweating. I fall asleep in the bath area of my room, spread out on the floor. That's where the ghost finds me. I wake to his poking me in the stomach with the foot of his boot. It's only grogginess that keeps me from crying out. Rise, youth, the ghost says. The roads want you to train tonight. I push myself up, too exhausted to disobey. Outside on the dewy grass, with the first rays of sun creeping across the island, the ghost shows me how to climb trees silently. How to put down a foot without snapping a branch or crackling a dried leaf. I thought I'd learned how in my lessons at the palace, but he shows me mistakes my teachers didn't bother correcting. I try over and over. Mostly I fail. Good, he says, once my muscles are shaking. He's spoken so little that his voice startles me. He could more easily pass for human than Vivi, with that subtler point on his ears, light brown hair, and hazel eyes. And yet he seems unknowable to me, both calmer and colder than she is. The sun is almost up. The leaves are turning to gold. Keep practicing. Sneak up on your sisters. When he grins with sandy hair falling over his face, he seems younger than I am, but I'm sure he's not. And when he goes, he does it in such a way that it appears like vanishing. I head back home and use what I've just learned to slyfoot my way past the servants on the stairs. I make it to my room, and this time when I collapse, I manage to do it in my bed. Then I get up the next day and do everything all over again.